3 in the morning. My phone buzzed like an angry wasp on the nightstand. The caller ID made my blood freeze. Dad, CIA. I hadn't talked to my father in 2 years. Last time was Mom's funeral, where he stood like a granite statue in his black suit, eyes scanning the crowd like he was expecting snipers. Jack! His voice was gravel and whiskey. Are you home? Dad, it's 3 a.m. What? Answer me. Are you home? Is Susan there? Is Ethan safe? Something in his tone made me sit up straight. 20 years of marriage to a real estate shark had taught me to read danger signals. But this was different. This was the voice that had interrogated terrorists in dark rooms. Yeah, we're all here. Why? Lock every door, right now. Take Ethan to the guest room. Don't let Susan know I called. The line went dead. I stared at the phone, my heart hammering against my ribs. Susan was sleeping beside me, her blonde hair spread across the pillow like spilled champagne. She looked peaceful, innocent even. But lately, nothing about my wife seemed innocent. I slipped out of bed, grabbed my robe, and padded down the hallway to Ethan's room. My 14-year-old son was sprawled across his bed, gaming headset still on, controller in his hand. Kid had fallen asleep playing again. Ethan, I shook his shoulder gently. Hey, buddy, wake up. His eyes opened, confused and sleepy. Dad, what time is it? Late. Listen, I need you to come sleep in the guest room tonight. She might be getting sick. Don't want you catching anything. It was a weak lie, but Ethan was too tired to question it. He stumbled after me to the guest room, flopped onto the bed, and was snoring within minutes. I locked the guest room door from the inside, then crept through the house like a burglar in my own home. Front door, locked. Back door, locked. Sliding patio door, locked. Windows, all secure. As I finished my circuit, headlights swept across the living room wall. A car was pulling into our driveway with its lights off. My blood turned to ice water. I pressed myself against the window frame and peered out. Susan's silver BMW was creeping up the driveway like a predator. But Susan was upstairs, asleep in our bed. Wasn't she? I ran back to the bedroom. The bed was empty, sheets still warm, footsteps crunched on the gravel outside. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, then stopped. What would I tell them? My wife is breaking into her own house? The front door handle rattled. Then came the scraping of metal on metal, someone picking the lock, someone who knew what they were doing. I backed toward the stairs, phone clutched in my sweaty palm. The front door swung open with barely a whisper. A figure stepped inside, silhouetted against the streetlight. It was Susan, but she moved differently, purposeful, predatory. And she was carrying something long and dark, a shotgun. Jack, her voice was honey over broken glass. Where are you, honey? We need to talk. I pressed myself against the wall at the top of the stairs, hardly daring to breathe. This wasn't my wife. This was someone wearing her face. I know you're awake, Jack. Your father called you, didn't he? Told you to hide. She knew about Dad's call. How could she possibly know? You always were Daddy's little boy, she continued, her heels clicking on the hardwood as she moved through our house like she owned it. Which, legally, she did. Even at 42, running to Daddy when things get tough. I heard her climbing the stairs. Each step was deliberate, measured. The shotgun barrel scraped against the banister. The thing is, Jack, your daddy made some enemies over the years. People with long memories. People who know how to wait. She reached the top of the stairs. In the dim hallway light, I could see her face clearly for the first time. It was Susan, but her eyes were different. Cold. Empty. Where's our son, Jack? Safe, I managed to croak. She smiled, and it was like watching a snake bare its fangs. Good. That's good. Because what happens next? Well, Ethan doesn't need to see it. The shotgun swung toward me. I dove sideways as the blast shattered the wall where my head had been. Plaster and wood splinters rained down like deadly snow. I scrambled toward the guest room, but Susan was faster than I'd expected. The shotgun stock caught me across the back of the skull, and stars exploded behind my eyes. As I hit the floor, I heard her voice, but it seemed to come from very far away. You never did know who you married, did you, Jack? Then darkness swallowed me whole. Let me back up and tell you how a cybersecurity consultant, married to a successful real estate agent, ends up getting clocked by his own wife with his own shotgun, in his own hallway, at 3 in the morning. It started, like most disasters, with something small. Susan had been working late again. Third time that week, fifth time in 2 weeks. Now, my wife was ambitious. Had been since the day I met her at a charity auction 15 years ago. She'd bid on a weekend in Napa just to outbid the woman next to her, then gave me the trip because she didn't have time for wine country nonsense. But this was different. Susan had always been a workaholic, but she'd never been secretive about it. She used to complain about difficult clients, problem properties, nightmare inspections. Lately, she just said work stuff and changed the subject. The first real warning sign came on a Tuesday. I was making coffee when her phone buzzed on the counter. The text preview lit up the screen. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Same place, mem." When I asked about it, Susan barely looked up from her laptop. New client, very demanding. Michael Patterson, big developer. Could mean huge commissions if I play this right. She was lying. I'd learned to read Susan's tells over 15 years of marriage. When she lied, she touched her left earring. She just twisted it like she was tuning a radio. That night, she came home at midnight smelling like expensive cologne and cheap wine. When I kissed her hello, she turned her head so I caught her cheek instead of her lips. "Long day?" I asked. "Brutal. This Patterson deal is going to kill me." There was the earring again. Twist, twist. I started paying attention after that, really paying attention. It's amazing what you notice when you're looking for it. Susan had always been meticulous about her appearance, but suddenly she was buying new lingerie, expensive stuff, still in the bags when I found them hidden in her closet. When I asked about it, she said she was treating herself and got defensive when I pointed out the tags were still on. Her phone habits changed too. She used to leave it lying around, answer calls in front of me, let me use it to look something up if mine was charging. Now it was always face down, always password protected, always within arm's reach. The final straw came the following Friday. Susan announced she was going to a girls' weekend in Baltimore with her friend Karen. Spa treatments, shopping, the works. "Since when do you do spa weekends?" I asked. "Since I've been working myself to death for this family. I deserve a break, don't I?" She had a point. Susan worked hard, brought in good money. If she wanted a weekend away, she'd earned it. But something felt wrong. Saturday afternoon, I was at Home Depot buying mulch when I saw Karen loading groceries into her car. In our town, not in Baltimore. I almost called out to her, then stopped. If Karen was here, where was Susan? That night, I did something I'd never done before in 15 years of marriage. I checked Susan's credit card statements online. The Marriott downtown. 2 nights, presidential suite, charged to our joint account. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through the charges. Dinner at Le Bernardin, $400 for 2 people. Champagne service, $200. Spa treatments, for 1 person, not 2. Susan wasn't with Karen. She was with someone else, someone she was trying to impress. I sat in my home office until 2 in the morning, staring at those charges, feeling like the world's biggest fool. 15 years of marriage, and my wife was cheating on me with some guy named Michael Patterson. The worst part wasn't even the betrayal. It was how stupid I felt, how completely blind I'd been. When Susan came home Sunday night, glowing and relaxed, she kissed me on the cheek and said, "I feel like a new woman. Karen and I had the best time." "That's great, honey. You look refreshed." She smiled and went upstairs to unpack. I heard the shower running and wondered if she was washing off another man's touch. That's when I decided to find out exactly who Michael Patterson was and what he wanted with my wife. Michael Patterson wasn't hard to find. In the real estate world of Northern Virginia, he was what you'd call a player. The kind of guy who wore expensive suits, drove a Porsche, and had his picture in the business section of the Washington Post at least once a month. Patterson Development had its fingers in half the new construction projects between D.C. and Richmond. Shopping centers, office complexes, luxury condos, the kind of developments that made developers rich and traffic worse. He was also married to a woman named Lisa Patterson, a pediatric surgeon at Georgetown University Hospital. They had 2 kids and lived in a mansion in Great Falls that probably cost more than I'd make in 10 years. So why was he screwing around with my wife? I spent the next week doing what I do best, gathering information. 20 years in cybersecurity had taught me that everyone leaves digital footprints, and most people are terrible at covering their tracks. Susan thought she was being careful, but she'd made rookie mistakes. She'd been using our shared laptop to research restaurants, hotels, even lingerie websites. The browser history told a story she probably didn't realize she was writing. More damning were the photos. Hidden in a folder labeled Tax Documents 2023 inches were dozens of pictures I'd never seen before. Susan at fancy restaurants, Susan in hotel rooms, Susan wearing lingerie I'd never seen her in. And in some of them, reflected in mirrors or windows, the ghost of another person. A man with salt and pepper hair and expensive tastes. But the real treasure trove was Susan's email. She'd been sloppy about logging out of the shared computer, and her Gmail was still active. I felt like a creep reading her private messages, but I felt like a bigger fool for trusting her. The emails between Susan and MP went back 6 months. They started professional, discussions about properties, market conditions, investment opportunities. But by the 3rd month, the tone had shifted. You looked incredible today. That blue dress should be illegal. MP. You're terrible, but I can't stop thinking about what you said in the car. Susan. Next week, I'm booking us somewhere special. Just you and me, MP. I can't wait. Jack's been so distant lately. It's like he doesn't even see me anymore. Susan. That one hit like a punch to the gut. I'd been distant? I worked from home, made dinner half the time, went to every one of Ethan's school events. What more did she want? But the worst emails were the recent ones. The ones where they stopped talking about feelings and started talking about plans. Jack's not going to just roll over in a divorce. He's got that military background and his father's connections. We need to be smart about this, Susan. Leave that to me. I know people who specialize in making difficult husbands more cooperative. A few domestic disturbance calls, maybe some evidence of erratic behavior, and any judge will see you need protection, MP. You really think we can make this work? The age difference, your wife, the kids. Susan. Lisa's been checked out for years. She cares more about her patients than her family. As for the kids, they'll adjust. They always do. And Jack, well, let's just say I've dealt with inconvenient people before. MP. I read that exchange 5 times, each reading making my blood a little colder. They weren't just having an affair. They were planning to destroy my life. The final email in the chain was sent just 2 days ago. Everything's in place. Karen's on board. She'll back up whatever story we need about Jack's behavior. The lawyer says with the right documentation, I can get full custody in the house. Jack will be lucky to get supervised visitation, Susan. Perfect. And after the divorce is final, MP. After the divorce, we can be together properly. No more sneaking around, no more cheap hotels. You, me, and a fresh start, Susan. I love it when you talk about our future, baby. Speaking of which, I have a surprise for you tonight. Something that's going to change everything, MP. That email was time-stamped yesterday at 3:47 p.m. Whatever Patterson had planned, it was happening now. I printed everything, every email, every photo, every credit card statement. Then I copied it all to a secure drive and hid it in my gun safe, along with my father's old service pistol and the emergency cash I kept for situations exactly like this. Because if Susan and her boyfriend thought they could railroad me, they were about to learn something about Jack Morrison that they should have researched more carefully. I wasn't just a cybersecurity consultant. I was the son of a CIA operative who taught me that in any war, intelligence wins battles, but preparation wins wars. And this was definitely war. I didn't have to wait long to see Patterson's surprise in action. The next morning, Susan announced she was showing properties all day and wouldn't be home until late. She kissed me goodbye like nothing had changed, like she wasn't planning to destroy my life and steal my son. Don't wait up, she said, touching her earring. This could run really late. Sure thing, honey. Good luck with the Patterson account. I watched her face carefully when I said his name. For just a second, her mask slipped. Fear flickered in her eyes, then disappeared behind her practiced smile. It's going really well. He's very hands-on. After she left, I called in sick to work and prepared for surveillance. If Patterson was planning something big, I wanted to see it coming. I followed Susan to her office, then watched as she got into a black Mercedes that definitely wasn't hers. Through my binoculars, I could see the driver clearly for the first time. Michael Patterson was everything I'd expected, and worse. Handsome in that artificial way that came from expensive grooming and better living through chemistry. He looked like he'd stepped out of a magazine ad for luxury watches or high-end whiskey. They drove to the Ritz-Carlton in Pentagon City. I parked across the street and watched them check in like they owned the place. Patterson had his hand on the small of Susan's back, guiding her like she was his property. I waited 30 minutes, then followed them inside. The hotel bar was dimly lit and expensive, the kind of place where a beer cost $20 and nobody batted an eye. I found a corner table with a clear view of the elevators and settled in to wait. They came down 2 hours later, both looking satisfied and smug. Susan's hair was messed up, and Patterson's tie was loose. They weren't even trying to hide what they'd been doing. I followed them to lunch at a restaurant that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. They sat at a corner table, heads close together, talking intently about something that made Susan laugh and Patterson smile like a shark. That's when I decided to get closer. The restaurant had a bar that ran along one wall, close enough to their table that I could hear their conversation if I was careful. I ordered a scotch and pretended to watch the news on the silent TV above the bar. Everything's in place, Patterson was saying. Karen's ready to testify that she's seen bruises, heard you crying on the phone about Jack's temper. She'll really do that? Susan sounded nervous. She owes me. I helped her brother out of some legal trouble last year. She'll say whatever we need her to say. And the other thing? Patterson leaned closer, lowering his voice. Tonight, my guy will make it look like a break-in gone wrong. Nothing fatal, just enough to put Jack in the hospital for a few days. While he's recovering, you file the restraining order. Claim he's been threatening you, that you're afraid for your safety. My blood turned to ice. They weren't just planning to frame me. They were planning to have me beaten up to make it look convincing. What about Ethan? Susan asked. He'll be fine. Kids are resilient. Once Jack's out of the picture and we're together, Ethan will come around. They always do. Susan nodded, but I could see doubt in her face. For a moment, she looked like the woman I'd fallen in love with 15 years ago. Then Patterson reached across the table and took her hand. Trust me, baby. This time tomorrow, your problems will be over. Jack will be in the hospital. You'll have a restraining order, and we can start planning our real future together. And your wife. Lisa's so busy saving other people's children, she barely notices her own family. The divorce will be a relief for both of us. They were talking about destroying two families like they were discussing the weather. I wanted to march over there and confront them, but I forced myself to stay calm. Anger was a luxury I couldn't afford right now. Instead, I paid my tab and left. I had planning to do. If Patterson wanted to play dirty, I was going to show him what dirty really looked like. But first, I needed to make sure Ethan was safe. I picked up my son from school early, claiming a family emergency. What's going on, Dad? Ethan asked as we drove home. You look weird. Just some grown-up stuff, buddy. How would you like to spend the night at Grandpa Morrison's house? Ethan's face lit up. My father might be a cold, distant man, but he'd always had a soft spot for his grandson. And more importantly, his house was a fortress that would keep Ethan safe while I dealt with Patterson's surprise. Can we stop and get pizza on the way? Ethan asked. Sure thing, whatever you want. As I drove toward my father's house, my phone rang. The caller ID said, Dad, CIA. I answered on the first ring. Jack, where are you? Bringing Ethan to your place. We need to talk. I know. I've been making some calls. Your wife's boyfriend has some very interesting friends. You know about Patterson? Son, I've known about Patterson longer than you have. The question is, what are you going to do about it? I looked at Ethan in the rearview mirror. He was playing on his phone, oblivious to the adult drama swirling around him. Whatever it takes to protect my family. Good. Come to the house. We have work to do. As I hung up, I realized that for the first time in 20 years, my father and I were on the same side of something. It was going to be an interesting night. My father's house looked like a suburban fortress, which it basically was. Reinforced doors, bulletproof windows, and enough security cameras to monitor a small country. When you've spent 30 years making enemies in dark corners of the world, you learn to sleep with one eye open. Dad met us at the door, and I was struck by how much he'd aged since Mom's funeral. His hair was completely gray now, and there were new lines around his eyes. But his handshake was still firm, and his gaze was still sharp enough to cut glass. Ethan, go raid the kitchen, he said to my son. I stocked up on that cereal you like. After Ethan disappeared into the house, Dad led me to his study. The walls were covered with commendations, photos with people whose faces were blacked out for security reasons, and enough military hardware to outfit a small army. Tell me everything, he said, pouring 2 glasses of bourbon. I laid out the whole story. The emails, the surveillance, the conversation I'd overheard at lunch. Dad listened without interruption, his face growing darker with each detail. Patterson's connected, he said when I finished. His company does work for some government contractors, which gives him access to people with flexible morals. The kind of people who'll put you in the hospital for the right price. Can you stop them? I can do better than that. I can make sure they never try this again. He walked to his desk and pulled out a thick file folder. Michael Patterson, age 43, married to Dr. Lisa Patterson, 2 children. Patterson Development has been under FBI investigation for money laundering for the past 8 months. They just haven't found enough evidence to make arrests yet. How do you know all this? Dad smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. I still have friends in the community. When you called me about Susan acting strange, I did some digging. Patterson's been using his construction projects to wash money for some very unpleasant people. Russian mob, specifically. And Susan doesn't know? Your wife thinks she's landed a rich boyfriend who's going to give her the high life. She has no idea she's sleeping with a criminal who's probably going to end up in federal prison within the next 6 months. I felt a strange mix of relief and disappointment. Relief that Susan wasn't a criminal mastermind, just an unfaithful wife who'd picked the wrong man to cheat with. Disappointment that the woman I'd loved for 15 years could be so easily manipulated by expensive dinners and empty promises. So what do? We give Patterson exactly what he's planning to give you, but we do it better. Dad opened his laptop and showed me a series of surveillance photos. Patterson entering hotels with women who weren't his wife. Patterson meeting with men who looked like they'd stepped out of a gangster movie. Patterson accepting envelopes full of cash in parking garages. The FBI has been watching him for months, but they need something concrete to make their case, something that ties him directly to the money laundering. And you have that? Not yet, but we're going to get it tonight. He pulled out a small device that looked like a hearing aid. Wireless transmitter. You're going to wear this when Patterson's people come calling. Everything they say will be recorded and transmitted to a secure server. When they threaten you, when they mention Patterson's name, when they talk about the money they're being paid, it'll all be evidence. You want me to let them beat me up? I want you to let them try. But you won't be facing them alone. Dad walked to a gun cabinet and pulled out 2 tactical vests and a pair of night vision goggles. Your mother always said I was a bad influence on you. Tonight, she would have been right. We spent the next 2 hours planning. Dad's contacts had confirmed that Patterson had hired 2 men to convince me that staying married to Susan wasn't in my best interests. They were planning to break into the house around midnight, rough me up enough to require hospitalization, and make it look like a robbery gone wrong. What they didn't know was that we'd be ready for them. At 11:30, I was sitting in my living room, lights dimmed, wearing the wire and a tactical vest under my shirt. Dad was positioned in the backyard with night vision equipment and a camera with a telephoto lens. If Patterson's thugs said or did anything incriminating, we'd have it recorded from multiple angles. At 11:47, a dark sedan pulled into my driveway with its lights off. 2 men got out. Both were big. Both moved like professionals. One carried a crowbar. The other had what looked like a telescoping baton. They approached the front door cautiously, checking windows and looking for signs of movement. I stayed perfectly still, letting them think I was asleep. The lock-picking took them less than 30 seconds. These weren't random criminals. They were professionals who'd done this before. And the front door opened silently, and they stepped into my house like they owned it. Morrison, one of them called softly. Jack Morrison, we need to talk. I stood up slowly, hands visible, trying to look scared. It wasn't hard. Who are you? What do you want? The taller one smiled, and it was like looking at a shark. We're friends of Michael Patterson. He asked us to deliver a message. I don't know any Michael Patterson. Sure you do. He's the guy who's been keeping your wife company while you're sitting here playing with computers. The shorter one moved to flank me, cutting off my escape route to the kitchen. They'd done this before. Mr. Patterson wants you to understand something, the tall one continued. Your marriage is over. Your wife's moving on. You can make this easy, or you can make it hard. But either way, it's happening. And if I don't want a divorce, then you're going to have some accidents, starting tonight. The short one raised his baton. Nothing personal, Morrison. But Patterson's paying us good money to make sure you see reason. How much money? They exchanged glances. The tall one shrugged. 10 grand each, plus a bonus if we make it convincing. Patterson must really want my wife. Patterson wants a lot of things. Your wife, your house, your kid. And what Patterson wants, Patterson gets. That's just how the world works. The short one stepped closer, baton raised. Time to learn some manners, Morrison. That's when the lights came on, and my father stepped through the back door with a shotgun. "Gentlemen," Dad said calmly, "you're trespassing." The two men spun around, suddenly realizing they were trapped between us. "Easy, old man," the tall one said. "We don't want any trouble." "Then you shouldn't have broken into my son's house." Dad's voice was ice cold, and I remembered why foreign governments had paid him to ask questions in dark rooms. "You're going to put down your weapons, sit on that couch, and tell us everything Michael Patterson paid you to do, and I mean everything." The short one looked like he was thinking about rushing Dad. That was a mistake. Dad had been handling armed men since before these thugs were born. "Son," Dad said to me, without taking his eyes off the intruders, "call the police. Tell them we have a home invasion in progress." "Wait," the tall one said quickly. "Wait, let's talk about this." "I'm listening." "Patterson hired us to rough up Morrison, make it look like a robbery. Nothing fatal, just enough to put him in the hospital." "Why?" "His girlfriend wants a divorce, but she needs evidence that Morrison's dangerous. A home invasion, some injuries, and she gets a restraining order. And Patterson pays you $10,000 each for this, plus expenses, plus a bonus if Morrison ends up needing surgery." Dad nodded slowly. "And where does Patterson get this kind of money?" The two men exchanged nervous glances. "We don't ask questions about Patterson's business," the short one said. "Well, you're going to start asking them now." Dad pulled out his phone and played a recording of their entire conversation. Their faces went white as they heard their own voices confessing to conspiracy, assault, and extortion. "Here's what's going to happen," Dad continued. "You're going to tell us everything you know about Patterson's operation. Who he works for, where the money comes from, what other jobs you've done for him. In exchange, maybe the FBI will be interested in making a deal." "FBI?" the tall one squeaked. "Oh yes. Patterson's been under federal investigation for months. You gentlemen just became star witnesses in a money laundering case." It took them about 30 seconds to start talking. By the time the police arrived, we had enough evidence to put Patterson away for the next 20 years. The two thugs were singing like a church choir, confessing to everything from extortion to assault to money laundering. But the night wasn't over yet. I still had to deal with Susan. Susan came home at 2:30 a.m., expecting to find me in the hospital and the house in chaos. Instead, she found me sitting in the kitchen with a cup of coffee and a stack of printed emails. "Jack?" She looked around nervously. "What are you doing up? Where are the police cars?" "Sit down, Susan." Something in my voice made her freeze. For the first time in months, she really looked at me, saw me. "What's going on?" I slid the stack of emails across the table. Her face went white as she recognized her own words. "You read my private messages?" "I read the evidence of your plan to have me beaten up and frame me for domestic violence." Susan's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. "Jack, I can explain." "Can you? Can you explain why you've been planning to steal my son and destroy my life for a man who's been under FBI investigation for money laundering?" "FBI investigation? What are you talking about?" I pulled out my phone and showed her the news article that had gone live an hour ago. "Local developer arrested in federal money laundering scheme." Susan read the headline 3 times before it sank in. "Michael's been arrested, along with the 2 men he hired to put me in the hospital tonight. They're all in federal custody, and they're all talking." Susan slumped in her chair like a puppet with cut strings. Oh God, what have I done?" "You've destroyed our marriage for a criminal who was using you to launder Russian mob money. Congratulations." Tears started flowing down her cheeks, but I felt nothing. The woman I'd loved for 15 years was gone, replaced by a stranger who'd been willing to have me beaten up for a chance at a bigger house. "Jack, please. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake, but we can fix this. We can go to counseling. We can—" "No, Susan, we can't." I pulled out a folder containing divorce papers I'd had drawn up that afternoon. "You have 2 choices. You can sign these papers, agree to joint custody of Ethan, and walk away with your dignity intact. Or you can fight me in court, where all of your emails and all of Patterson's confessions will become public record." Susan stared at the papers like they were written in a foreign language. "Where will I go? What will I do?" "That's not my problem anymore." She signed the papers with shaking hands, tears dripping onto the legal documents that ended 15 years of marriage. "For what it's worth," she whispered, "I did love you once." "I know," I said. "That's what makes this so sad." Susan packed a bag and left that night. The divorce was finalized 6 weeks later, with no contest from her side. I got the house, joint custody of Ethan, and my life back. Patterson was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. His wife Lisa divorced him while he was awaiting trial and moved to California with their children. His development company collapsed, taking several of his investors down with it. The two thugs he'd hired testified against him in exchange for reduced sentences. They each got 5 years and a permanent place on the FBI's watch list. Karen, Susan's friend who'd agreed to lie about seeing me abuse my wife, was charged with conspiracy and perjury. She got 2 years probation and a felony record that ended her career in real estate. As for Susan, she moved to Florida and got a job selling timeshares. Last I heard, she was dating a retired insurance salesman and living in a 2-bedroom condo that probably cost less than our monthly mortgage used to be. Ethan adjusted better than I'd expected. Kids are resilient, and he'd seen enough of his mother's behavior in the final months to understand that the divorce wasn't entirely my fault. He spends weekends with Susan when she can afford to fly him down, but he's made it clear that he considers my house his real home. My father and I have a better relationship now than we've had since I was a child. Turns out that facing down armed thugs together is excellent for family bonding. He's teaching Ethan how to shoot, how to spot surveillance, and how to read people's intentions. Skills that will serve him well in whatever life throws at him. As for me, I've learned that sometimes the person you trust most is the one most capable of destroying you. But I've also learned that with the right preparation, the right allies, and the right evidence, even the most elaborate betrayal can be turned against the betrayer. Susan thought she was playing chess while I was playing checkers. She was wrong. I was playing poker, and I had all the cards. 6 months after the divorce was final, I got a letter from Susan. She wanted to reconnect and explore the possibility of reconciliation. She'd realized that Michael Patterson had been a terrible mistake and that I was the only man who'd ever really loved her. I threw the letter in the trash without finishing it. Some bridges, once burned, should stay burned. I'm 43 years old, single, and raising a teenage son who's learned that actions have consequences and that trust, once broken, can never be fully repaired. It's not the life I'd planned, but it's an honest life. And after 15 years of marriage to a woman who is planning to have me beaten up for insurance money, honesty feels like a luxury I can finally afford.